So let me just pull this up there with me for a second because I'm going to need this. Rachel, are you ready?
I think so.
Okay, she thinks she's ready. Is everybody ready?
Hello.
Okay.
Hello.
Let's welcome on stage. There's a lot of noise out there. What's going on? Is there an air show going on outside? Okay. So Rachel Davies is the author of the first book on Agile Coaching. She's an expert in Agile approaches to software development, and especially extreme programming. She started coding 30 years ago, or 30 years plus a little maybe, or less a little maybe, around about there. And she still enjoys a combination of creativity and problem solving. After 5 years of coaching extreme programming, she's the development teams at Unruly. Tell me more about that. Unruly? Okay, we'll hear about that, I guess.
We'll touch it.
And recently, very much involved at Makers Academy in London, okay, which is a coding bootcamp. Let's give a warm round of applause for Rachel.
Hello. I hope you can hear me okay. If you stop being able to hear me, start waving at the back. I'll try not to crackle, but it may... You can't hear me?
Take that one, Rachel.
Take this one? Yeah. Does this...
Now that should work.
Should I take the other one off? Yeah? Okay, all right. So I'm double mic'd. Okay, so I'm very pleased to be here. The people at the back, you can now hear, yes? Cool, okay. So, yes, it's true, I have worked in the software industry for 30 years. And that's one of the reasons that I know that it's important to build learning into whatever you do, because when I started out, there were completely different technologies. There was no web development. It was even before the object orientation boom of the 90s, before the Agile Manifesto. So I have had to learn about all of those things and maybe forget some of what I learned as well. So now I work as a software developer at Makers Academy. I'm having a bit of a break from coaching teams and Agile things, and I'm quite enjoying writing some software for a change. But this talk is deliberately, I've designed it thinking about you as you finish the day at Agile Greece Summit. Right, who has learned something new at the conference? Raise your hands. Okay? And is there something that you'd actually like to try out when you get back to work? Fewer people. Right, this talk is about my tips for taking ideas from conferences and trying to introduce them to your team. And the reason I'm talking about it is because I have come to conferences and been all excited hearing about an idea, and then I've gone back to my team and had some struggles to kind of encourage people to try something new. So, there are lots and lots of things that have been covered today. Here are just a few of them. Uncovering the cost of delay, programmer oaths, test-driven development, refactoring a big ball of mud, and even Unix tools in the lightning talks, right? So it's lots of things that you could potentially want to take back. But what do you think? What do you think the reaction of your teammates is going to be? When you get back, you're like, I went to Agile Greece Summit on Friday, this is what I found out. Are they all going to go, yes, we're going to do it, we're going to do it. So great that you've come to tell us all these things. This is not the normal reaction. In fact, maybe people forgot that you were even here. And they'd be busy and maybe slightly resentful that you went to a conference and they didn't go to the conference. So here are some typical concerns. This is going a little bit strangely. Right. In my experience, here are some questions and worries that people typically have. So, you're introducing something, a new technique, which people don't already know how to do, so they're not necessarily going to be good at it, so they may be concerned about that. They may be concerned about, do we have permission? Is it okay with the management if we're allowed to do this? Also, okay, so you heard an expert at the Agile conference say this. What if it doesn't work in our situation? And then there are always some people who are like, might be a bit hard work. Let's not bother. Let's keep doing things the same old way. I'm happy, right? So you will normally face some resistance when you try and introduce new ideas. So my advice is really that don't rush into it. When you're on Monday morning, that's probably not the best time to say, let's change everything. You are actually probably not ready to explain your ideas and share them with other people. Probably, if you heard a talk here, you are just at the beginning of learning about it yourself. And it might be a good idea to spend some more time, slow down, and actually learn about something before you try and share it with other people. Think about it from their perspective. Try and explain how it might be beneficial to you, to the company, to them. So it's not just you're trying to get credit for introducing some cool new idea. If people understand why it's beneficial to them, they may be a little bit more interested. You will, before talking about it to anyone, I would honestly recommend take some time, do some background research, practice, try and find out more about what you're about to introduce. You may have a bunch of questions. Try and think about those questions from the beginning. Actually make a backlog of those questions. These are things you need to research to be more confident about introducing your idea to your team. In order to introduce learning, you have to find some time when you're actually going to do this. And sometimes it isn't during the main work hours. If you want to invest in a new technique, sometimes you have to spend a little bit of time in the evening, maybe a little bit of time in the weekend, looking into something before you feel that it's worth spending the company time on. Now, in some organizations, you do have dedicated learning time, but in other situations, you have to invest in your idea before you bring it for your company to invest in. Now, once you have done a little bit of learning and you feel you're now ready, you know something, you've got some technique that you feel would be beneficial for your teammates, and you think, now's the time, I can start talking about it now. Think about how you will share it with other people. It will go much better if you can actually make it accessible and interesting for other people and not something that's your special idea. So try and give away as much as you can about what you've learned. So share what you've learned and don't try to hold anything back. Try to make sure that everybody who's curious about the new technique that you want to use, you're open with them, you give them the big tips that you've found out so far through your learning, and you're not trying to hold on to that idea. People need to be confident that you are trying to do things together with them rather than get one over by getting recognition for your idea. Otherwise, they'll be suspicious. One thing that is really helpful and will help you is that learning makes people happy. People love learning and they really can't switch that aspect of their brain off. If there isn't anything specific, they'll be always looking to figure something out, try something. It may not be about work. So people do have this natural curiosity. They enjoy being able to master new techniques. So ultimately, people are usually drawn to acquiring new skills. But it can be very difficult for people to learn if the conditions are not right. And a classic situation can be if you're in a very, very busy project with some heavy deadlines and people are working extra hours and there's a lot of stress around. This is never a good idea to start something new at this point. People are burnt out and not receptive to trying things. So be sensitive to people's workloads. Try to think of when will be a good time rather than just thrust your new idea upon them when you feel ready. Think, when are they ready? And if you can, try to make a collection of materials and offer training so that people find it easy to start. If you can invest in making a new technique easy and available for other people to try, then they are going to feel that you have given something, and so they are going to be more willing to give it a try themselves. Make it attractive. This is something that if you try this technique, you're going to have something extra, and it's worth you coming and investing your time. Try to be really clear why it's valuable to people. And again, don't just make it all, Don't just try to make it all about you. Try to make sure that other people, if you have people who are interested in the initiative that you want to do, if you can try and make it look like they are leading parts and give them interesting parts of the initiative to try, so it doesn't feel like somehow you're going to claim all the glory at the end. So normally I have a different picture when I talk about skeptics, but I've thought this morning skepticism comes from Greece, and so it would be worthwhile to show one of the philosophers who came up with the basic philosophy around it. But remember, when people are skeptical, they are actually giving your ideas some serious consideration. They are thinking about it and trying to help you make an idea better. And so in that regard, if somebody sounds critical or giving, some reasons why things won't work, don't try to push them away thinking they're negative. Try to understand that they are actually helping you improve your ideas. Listen to them, try to get to the bottom of their concerns, because if you do that, you will have your idea will become stronger through answering their questions, through trying to work through what their concerns are. So I've talked very generically about introducing new ideas, and now I want to talk a little bit about some techniques that the team that I was working with for the last 5 years have been using. So I want to explain a little bit about the company so you'll understand a little bit more of the context. So Unruly is a company that's been running for 12 years. It was founded by people who had worked in an XP company before that. So they have been practicing XP from the very beginning. So the CEO, the CTO, the COO all know XP and do not know any other approaches. So it is the kind of place where it's okay to do pair programming, because that's what they believe is the best way to work. And if you can bear in mind that when I'm talking about the practices that we tried to boost the learning of XP teams in that environment, that we had full support from management from the very beginning, and that we were a very successful company. So that startup was 3 people 12 years ago, and about 2 years ago got acquired by News Corporation, and they have many products, but they are really strong in product development. So they are making new products, testing new markets, and that's why they want to work using an XP technique. So I'm probably not the first person to mention this today. I think a few other people have talked about how pair programming can be at the heart of an agile team. Now, this picture is just a random picture of developers who hate having their photographs taken. So all of the photographs are like, they're not models, they're not people who are acting like they're doing pair programming, they're actually pair programming, and quite annoyed that I'm taking a photo and showing it at a conference. So the way that we work using pair programming is our whole workspace is set up so it is easy to do pair programming. It's actually less easy to work on your own. And everybody is expected to do pair programming to make any change to production code. Now, this sounds very software development-y, and it is, but even if you are in a role that is completely different, maybe you are a project manager, it is possible to pair on tasks. Jutta Eckstein was talking this morning about how she's been working on a book that she's pair writing with somebody else, and I've also done this. Just because something is not code doesn't mean you can't pair on it, and I'd encourage you to try it. It's a very good way of learning from each other and helping each other to have confidence to learn about what you're trying to do. Not only can you do pair programming, and this is kind of, not only can you do pair programming, another practice that we introduced to the teams at Unruly about 3 or 4 years ago is mob programming. So it's very common to see groups of 3, 4 people working on the same problem. Now, that might seem wasteful, but it's actually very good if you've got a difficult problem that you're trying to solve, that you want everybody to understand why it has been solved the way it has, because everybody has to maintain it. Underpinning this kind of way of working is a collective ownership of the code. And when you have collective ownership, it's really important that people understand why the system is designed the way it is, so that they don't try and rewrite it to be somehow different and then lose the benefits. So this mob is actually, the middle guy is our user experience engineer. So it's not just for software developers. Quite often we might mob with a product manager also. This is one of the techniques we were using, which I thought it's probably, I had some photographs of us doing coding dojos, but then look really bad. Dark rooms with people all looking at computers. And it's a technique where you learn new programming techniques together. And when you organize a dojo, we had our coding dojos organized in work hours, so they were always Wednesday at 12 o'clock just before lunchtime, so that people didn't have to grumble about, I must waste my lunch hour on this coding dojo. And we used the coding dojos for all different, learning all kinds of different techniques. We were starting to build one part of our product using React, and that's a new and exciting framework. So lots of people showed up to the coding dojo, but then the guy who was running it said, hang on a minute, first you must learn CSS, then you must learn about packaging up the JavaScript, and only after we've got through all of that will we start learning React. And so what I'm trying to point out is that it's a good way to learn together. Sometimes it helps to be in a group and to share your frustrations with your other developers, and they give you a bit of moral support to actually keep trying. So after the dojo, people will say, oh, remember what we learned in the dojo, you have to do it like this, or you have to do it like that. The actual technique, this picture, I think I may have got it from Paris Coding Dojo, and it's the idea that it's like pair programming, you switch between the person who's driving and navigating, but you keep moving around. So everybody has a turn to drive, and then the people in the group can ask questions and give feedback at various points. It's a very effective learning technique. And there's a book about it by Emily Bate called Coding Dojo Handbook. The other thing we did was we encouraged all of our developers to give lightning talks to talk about the things that they had been learning about. This is important because it radiates the culture of that learning is important. If everybody is expected to actually share what they have learned, and one of the things that's interesting is when you prepare a presentation, you actually learn deeper your material. So it's good practice for people to have the understanding that if they're going to spend time on learning, they're also going to spend time presenting back to their colleagues and sharing that learning, and they will learn it in a deeper way. We were very lucky to have a system of 20% time. That means that every developer in the whole group got 1 day a week to work on learning. This could be investigating new products, investigating different languages, different techniques, or just deepening their learning about our existing code base. And again, it's not just, you have 1 day to like browse the web. You have to present back what you've talked about. So this picture here, again, is of developers on a Friday afternoon. And every Friday they have a ritual where they pass around a Viking hat. This guy with the striped t-shirt has a hat on, and it's the speaking token. And we pass it around, and each person says, they put the hat on, they say, this week on my goal card, I did this. And the goal card is their 20% time. Now, it's really important that the team leads, everybody takes part in this practice so that it shows developers it's okay to actually use the time. When we have new developers join the company, they're a little bit scared. They're like, what do I do my goal card on? What will I learn? And it's okay. Just pick something you're interested in, follow your interest, and tell us what you learned. And what we've found is this feeds back into us making better products. So it's a technique which can be very useful in creating product innovation. It's also, we shared the office with some guys who do this crazy advertising stunts. So they happen to be all dressed up, and one of the team leads wanted her photograph taken with them. And we used this photograph just to explain sometimes it's good to work with people who are from a different background than you are. So one of the practices that we always have is to take turns to swap teams, so that every 3 months we run a survey. We ask people if they'd like to switch teams, and based on the responses, we'll actually move people around so that people get exposure to different areas of the product stack, and they can share the learnings from their teams. So this keeps the teams fluid. And we've even extended this to beyond our organization. So we're very lucky. In London, there are a lot of companies who are practicing agile development techniques and software craftsmanship. So there are other organizations that do pair programming and test-driven development. And it's possible to arrange to swap people between the organizations, and you can get mutual learning. We chose to do it deliberately with companies who were not making the same product, so not our direct competitors, but we chose to do it with a couple of companies every year. So in this picture, this guy in the middle, he's from another company, and he's working on our infrastructure code with 2 of the other developers. And the idea is that at the end of the week, they present their observations about what they learned about us, and then when we send somebody to their organization, that person does the same for them. And so it's a way of getting a reflection on what your current practices are and what kinds of things you might be able to improve in. So it's very easy for me to kind of say, oh yeah, we were doing all these learning practices. It's actually very, very hard to embed them in an organization. So I was working as an agile coach with that organization for 4 of the years that I was there. And I knew that if I said, right, I'm going to organize all of the lightning talks, and I'm going to organize all of the coding dojos, and I'm going to organize all of these things, one, I would be making a lot of work for myself, and I'd constantly have to be hassling people saying, are you doing a talk this week, and have you booked the room? And so we have a deliberate policy where people take turns. So we take turns, different people. So if we have lightning talks, the last thing we ever say in our lightning talks session is, who will organize the next one? And somebody will volunteer, and then they will eventually, another lightning talk session will happen, and they will facilitate that to happen. If they don't organize it, then they don't get to stop doing it. They have to, they keep that responsibility until it has actually happened. So you have to care that changes are happening. You have to, if somebody says, I'm going to do a coding dojo, and then they're not ready by the time the week comes, and then the week after they're not ready, it's time for the team to say to them, okay, even though we would love to go to your Haskell coding dojo, we're not going to, we're going to let somebody else have a turn. So the other thing is to have a backlog of things that people want to put forward and encourage them to prepare those things so you're ready if somebody drops out or if somebody's away, that you can then pull something else in. So this is the taking turns part. I won't explain the picture. You can ask me afterwards. And this is another of our mysterious techniques. This is how we track whether people are actually taking their 20% time. It's clearly not instituted by a project manager. It's actually the developers who fill it in, and they fill it in the stand-up every day in the stand-up. I'll have to perhaps explain a little bit about what it is. These people down on, well, I'm gonna have to wave to explain. Right. These are people's faces. Each row represents a person. There is a key to what the symbols mean, but I cut it off the picture. I can explain what they mean. So, a sunshine, somebody's on holiday. A cross, somebody's ill. A circle with 2 dots, somebody's pairing. Some sort of pyramid of 3 people, that's mob programming. And you should be able to see that there are these snowflakes or asterisk shapes. Those are people taking their learning day. And what each team does at the stand-up is actually check to say, are you going to take a learning day? And you see nearly everyone has taken a learning day, except if they were on holiday that week, and then normally you would skip your learning day. So we do this to try and encourage everyone to consider learning on a daily basis. And then when we have our retrospectives, we actually take a photograph of the board, and it's one of the things that we take into the retrospective is, you probably won't be able to see, but on the table there are printouts of that, and there are also printouts of all the tasks that we've been working on that week. And that helps us to remember what happened, because I don't know if you've ever been in a retrospective where people were like, I can't really remember beyond yesterday, let alone 2 weeks ago. So we do always have like this thing that we take in. The other thing is that we encourage people from other teams to run the retrospectives for another team. So that means you get somebody who's independent. So I think I'm coming to the end of practices that we were doing at Unruly. This is the last one. And it's when we have a bunch of new people start, we have some, instead of a normal and regular induction, the last bunch of new starters have to train up the next bunch of new starters. So we have people who have been new to the company relatively recently are the people who can still remember what they didn't know. And so we get those people to train the next people. We also then encourage everybody to take a 1-week rotation in each of the teams, so they get exposure to each of the different technologies and the different stacks that we have. And then we have a little ritual where we give out certificates. So this is Tom receiving a certificate, even though he is a senior developer and very, very bright and knows tons of Java stuff. He still has to do the technical academy and go and learn all of the basic things about how our systems work. So, and then we make sure that the certificates are nicely designed and in proper glass frames so people can keep them. It's a memento, and it also encourages this feeling within the team that we celebrate learning, and that learning is a really important thing to our culture. So I wanted to just explain about some techniques that we were using at Unruly, which you could potentially use in your organizations. It may be that your organization is very different and some of those ideas may not work, but I would encourage you to consider trying at least one of these ideas. So now what? I'm near the end. So that we're near the end of the conference and near the beginning of the party after the conference. You'll be returning to work, presumably on Monday, and full of ideas about things that you talk to people. It doesn't need to be things that were actually presented to you. Often you get some very valuable ideas when you're talking in the coffee areas, or you meet people who are working on in another company that you didn't know about. So don't focus just on the presentations. You have to try. So actually do something. Don't just go to the conference and then go, oh, I tried to do this, it didn't work. Really, if you want to grow and learn yourself, you have to make experiments, you have to take risks, you have to try things that you're not good at. So take courage. Now, courage is one of the XP values, the extreme programming values, and I think it's the most important one, because it encourages you to move from a steady state. Instead of thinking, oh, look at what's happening, you have to step in, you have to take part, and you have to make an impact. So here are some practical tips of things that you can do when you get back. So take a little bit of time to learn more about something that you heard about at the conference. So you can read a book, you can watch a video, you can browse the web, you can keep the contact details of people that you spoke to at the conference and get back in touch with them. You can go to meetups. There are lots of ways that you can try and find out a little bit more about something you heard. Then look for opportunities where you might be able to introduce what you have learned to other people where you work. So just because they didn't get to go to the conference doesn't mean that they can't benefit from you coming here. So think about how you can share, how you can give back to your team what you learned here by writing a blog post, by giving a talk, by trying to make some difference for the positive about the kinds of things that you've learned at this conference. So that's the end of my talk. I've no idea whether I kept to time or gone too fast, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Rachel. Not only have you kept to time, but you've saved time, which means we have some time for the audience to ask you some questions. Some, I hope, very engaging questions, because we don't have the opportunity to have Rachel here every day. So let's go here.
Hi, I'm Evan Alexopoulos. I'm Greek, working in the Netherlands. Can you hear me? Or do
I
we
can
still have
sort of hear.
Okay. Now, is it now better?
Yes.
Okay. What I see, I hear you talking about 20% of time taken off for learning, investing in people, pair programming. What I see happening a lot is big companies having contractors doing the work for them, and then there is a big discussion on, do I pay for this 30%? Do the freelancers pay for this 30%? What are your views on that? How do you do that?
So I understand, and this is one of the reasons why I said for that company, it makes more sense. And they are, first of all, they're a product development company. Second of all, everybody is a full-time employee. Everybody's a full-time employee. And then that means that there isn't that question. However, I have worked with many organizations where there is a mix of permanent and contract. And I would say each organization has to evaluate whether it is worthwhile to benefit from doing learning activities together. For example, a coding dojo, yes, you are giving some extra skills that that contractor hasn't had to pay for, and you're paying that person while they're learning, but that person is also probably sharing their learning. So you focus more on the things where people in the team are sharing learning. So having contractors give lightning talks is quite good because they often have a varied background and maybe have worked in more different environments than where you are. And I've worked in organizations where you have developers who've been there for 20 years. It's actually really good for them to be exposed to ideas from the outside world. So it can be very beneficial. I think one of the strong arguments for investing in learning at work can be staff retention. And of course, that argument is not really there for contractors. However, some contractors can be really difficult to keep, and it may really be worthwhile to extend something. Maybe it's not a full day a week, but certainly I wouldn't exclude them from learning activities.
So I used to work for an organization, it was a government organization, and we had this mantra, always postpone meetings with time-wasting morons. So perhaps we could invest 10% of time-wasting meetings and create that 20% free time, because there's so many useless meetings that we have. So maybe we can consider that. Any more questions for Rachel? Yes.
Hi, and thanks for a very informative talk. I hear you have the learning part and the engagement part covered. How about performance? How do you know that these developers, these teams are actually high performing? What do you measure? What do you keep? I mean, you know they're learning something, you know they're happy, they're engaged, and they have lots of ceremonies, but how do you really know? What do you measure? What counts to see that they're actually performing?
In that environment, we measure revenue. We deploy features all the time, and we are very interested in making money and actually being a viable business. And I didn't talk about the XP practices very specifically, but those teams are honed to deliver small features that go live really, really quickly. And in that way, because they're providing constant value to the company and also providing 24-hour support to a global business, it's almost like, you know, they are the driving force behind the business. And so that's not always the case with software developers. For example, I've actually switched jobs now, and I'm working as a developer in a team that's supporting the business operations. And it's less, what I'm doing is less connected with the bottom line. So it does depend a little bit about what kind of business you're in, and that company is in a very dynamic and volatile environment where if just being able to implement something quite quickly can make us a lot of money, even over a weekend. So it's worthwhile to actually implement Agile practice and invest in the team.
Rachel, hi.
Hi.
It was
Whoops,
a
careful.
very informative talk, and it sounds great, but it can be a little bit intimidating with everything you've set up there for somebody to bring it into their organizations. Could you give us an idea how long this took?
So I agree with you. It's intimidating, and I would not, remember at the beginning I was saying slow down and one experiment at a time. Don't try and do all of that at once. I really would not advise that. And I would say when I joined the company, so I joined them 5 years ago, most of those practices weren't in place. Yes, pair programming was in place, but pretty much everything else was not in place. And so it took, I would say, a couple of years to get that so that it felt like the teams were owning it and it wasn't me making it happen. And eventually I was able to switch role and I was not even coaching the teams. And so it isn't something that requires the constant attention of a coach, but it is all about establishing a different kind of culture and a set of values that the people in all of the teams care about. They see the benefits to them and to the company. And if with any new practice, you have to connect with why is this valuable for me? Why is this valuable for the company? And if you can't answer both of those questions, things will not stick. So, yeah.
Okay, I don't think we have any more questions. Thank you so much for that fantastic talk.
Thank you.
Okay, great.